I'm very pleased to introduce my dear friend Dave Folland. I've had many mentors in CCL, but Dave Folland's been the most consistent and has had the greatest impact in my retirement years. Dave was the head of the CCL Salt Lake City chapter back in the day when I joined in 2017, and I think we hit it off for a number of reasons. One, he lived nearby. Uh, Two, we share a lot. We share a profession. We share friendships. We share love for the outdoors, hiking, and other such things. And three, Dave is just a generous, kind, wonderful, bright human being who's very influential and had a great impact on my life and still does. We enjoyed, for instance, Saturday night going down to, or was it Friday? Went down to Orem and saw the LDS Earth Stewardship presentation, which was outstanding, and plenty of time to talk on the way and enjoy his Tesla. In any case, since Dave backed off from his leadership a few years ago, and rightfully so, to have time for other things, I think he has turned his thoughts to his legacy, his impact on his family, the messages he wants to leave behind, and subsequently published a book which I've read cover to cover, Dave, and enjoyed immensely. I hope we hear a lot about it. And has done many other things and stays very engaged, but is not the primary leader right now. In addition, you find a big chapter in the book. Chapter 7 was about the creation of the LDS Action Team, and I hope you have some comments about that. We're very grateful for that specifically. So thank you, Dave, for in so many ways. I'll leave it at that because we want to hear from Dave.
Thank you so much, Dave. The feeling of respect for sure and enjoyment is mutual. I really appreciate that. So here's a challenge. We're going to share screen. Okay. I'm going to go. So this is going to be a kind of a photo presentation. Let me just see here. Give me a sec to get, there we go. Yeah.
Yep. We see it good.
Yeah. And it's going to kind of follow the book. This is the book that I wrote in about 3 years ago. My daughter came to me and said, Papa, you ought to write something about what you did in Citizens Climate Lobby. That's after I stepped down from the leadership. And she said, if you do it, I'll put it together and I'll publish it on Spotify. And so not Spotify, but anyways, Snapfish. So she was kind of the instigation for this. And as I thought about it, I thought, I know, from what I know, things are going to get more difficult for all of us who are alive as the planet warms. And I'd like my grandkids to know what I did for Citizens Climate Lobby. So that was the focus. I was thinking about it for my grandchildren. But as I put this presentation together tonight, I realized a couple of things. One is that in my presentation, I'd really like to highlight some of the people that I worked with, because I was able to volunteer shoulder to shoulder along with some very talented, energetic people. And the other thing is that we made progress. When we look at the White House today and the administration, we may feel a little discouraged, but when I look where we came from in around 2010, we've made significant progress. So anyway, there's the book, and the presentation today isn't exactly the book, but it's very similar to what I have in the book. And first off, I'd like to just give you a little, let me just see here. How do I?
It's on the phone. Is on it.
Here.
There's no picture and no voice.
Doug, can you help me? My slides are not advancing. So, that's an issue we hadn't dealt with. Tell you what, let me try this.
If you hit the right or left arrow or the space bar, does it advance?
No. Oh my gosh.
Or just hit escape and go back out to your
Yeah, I'm hitting
to
escape
the
and
gallery.
I'm hitting this. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to stop share, I think, and come back. But now you can see that, right?
No,
You can see
no,
the, oh, okay,
no,
because
that
I stopped,
unshared,
I
that
stopped
unshared
sharing.
it.
So um yeah. Well,
So go back,
I can share again. Yeah.
share again,
And here's a share.
and and
And
and so just double click that.
I'm gonna double click the next one just so you see.
Yeah, and don't do full screen. See if it's easier to
Uh,
advance this way.
okay, let me do this. Let's see if that, yeah, you can ignore this maybe on the left. Let's see if that'll work. Um, aha, good
Yeah,
job. Thank you, Doug.
I
Okay,
think the full screen is having a hard
okay.
time with
Yeah.
Zoom.
Okay. Um, well, this is the Athabasca Glacier, and the reason I show this is because as I worked as a pediatrician, a couple of things happened that gave me pause to think, boy, the climate is changing. And my friend who's on the call today, Ted Keel, was a good friend in high school, and when he graduated, he invited me on a 2-week trip with his parents to to Canada. And as part of that, we went to the Icefields Highway, where the biggest glacier here is the Athabasca Glacier. And in the Athabasca Glacier, they have markings where the glacier had been in the past, because in the past it filled in this whole basin, and you could see that it had changed. Well, I had an opportunity 39 years later to go back to the Athabasca Glacier, and I could see where in the 40 years of my lifetime it had retreated even significantly further. And I just kind of filed that away and say, boy, things are changing. Another thing occurred to me when I happened to visit with Betsy, Alaska, and we were by Anchorage, and there was a place called the Portage Glacier, and this used to be kind of filled in with ice. And I took this picture, and when I got home, I realized that my partner had taken a picture almost from the same place about 20 years prior. And I don't have that picture, but it was somewhat like this. And this is the Portage Valley. And again, I was thinking, boy, things are kind of changing. Something's changing with the climate. Well, I retired with no specific focus in mind of what to do, but I happened to uh, go to a talk where my friend Vaughn Lovejoy, who's on the call today, was speaking on behalf of Tim DeChristopher, who was a climate activist. And there I met Bill Barron. Now I don't have a picture of him either at that tabling, but he was tabling, and we talked a little bit about Citizens Climate Lobby. And I liked Bill, and I liked what he talked about, and he talked about approaching things in a nonpartisan way. I thought that's cool. I'm going to go to this organization. So I went to the first meeting, and in the first meeting there were about 5 of us sitting around a table. We listened to a national call through our iPhones, and anyway, it was kind of a ragtag small group at that time, starting in the Salt Lake chapter. So Bill founded the Salt Lake chapter. Not too long after that, Naomi Oreskes spoke at the University of Utah at the law school, and she had just published this book called Merchants of Doubt. Many of you have heard of that. And the subtitle really tells the essence of the book, how a handful of scientists obscured the truth on issues from tobacco smoke to global warming. And she told in detail how groups who were primarily politically motivated, but also were backed by lots of fossil fuel money, obscured the truth about global warming and, as it was said then, and climate change. When I heard that, it really disturbed me, realizing that future generations were going to pay the price for that deceit. And just like with tobacco smoke, the confusion that was raised by tobacco smoke put off for 20, 30, 40 years any real policy that decreased smoking, as I was worried this is going to happen with climate change. So Shortly after that, I decided to go to Washington, D.C. So Citizens Climate Lobby has a yearly conference. This was the second yearly conference, and they had it each summer. And it was Bill and myself and Judy Lord at the conference. And the conference consisted of 2 days of lecture and discussion, and 1 day of going on to Capitol Hill, where we had all day long scheduled meetings with members of Congress or their staff. And one conversation really stood out to me. Bill and I were meeting with J.J. Brown, who was the environmental lead for Senator Hatch. And it became quite contentious because we were saying we need green energy, and he was saying these are all the reasons that Senator Hatch doesn't want the green energy. And then Bill said, "Hey, I wonder if I could share something with you. The Holy Father, Pope Benedict, had the Pontifical Academy of Sciences write something about climate change, and they wrote this Fate of Mountain Glaciers in the Anthropocene. And I wonder if I could share that with you." Well, when he brought up this faith aspect perspective, it kind of just cut through some of the tension in the discussion right there. And kind of in the back of my mind, I kind of realized, boy, approaching this from the standpoint of faith is really important. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later in the discussion. Other thing, I met 3 people who really influenced me. One was Jim Hansen. So in the 1980s, it became more and more evident in the science that the Earth was warming and human activity was causing it. And he was called in 1988 to testify before the Senate committee about climate change and global warming. But since that time, not much had happened in terms of policy. He felt we needed a policy to go forward. And just a couple of years before that time, 2009, he'd written a book, Storms of My Grandchildren, because he said, hey, I want to lay it all out, what's happened and why we're not moving forward with policy. And I want to go back to my scientific research. Well, he didn't go back to the research. He stayed involved. In fact, he came up with the idea of we need to have a carbon tax, return the proceeds to people, and this is the most powerful way to move forward in reducing emissions. That turned out to be logically a very great idea, but politically not too good. We worked on it for 10 years, never got that passed. 2 other people who really influenced me, though, too, was Marshall Saunders, who founded Citizens Climate Lobby. Marshall was a very successful real estate developer, and he was also a philanthropist, and he gave microcredit loans to people in Bangladesh and Mexico. And he realized that if climate change proceeded the way it appeared like it would, that so many of the poor people that he had worked to bring out of poverty would be so adversely affected. So he conceived the idea of having a cadre of lobbyists who would be respectful, be nonpartisan, and who could move policy forward. But he was not an organizer person. He needed somebody else. So his friend, Mark Reynolds, he turned to him and said, Mark, I wonder if you'd help me out with this new organization, Citizens Climate Lobby. I can fund you as leader of it for 6 months, and then we'll see what happens after that. Well, Mark left a generous 6-figure job consulting with businesses, secure retirement, and jumped in. He said, I'll do that for 6 months. Well, he ended up staying for 10 years. And Mark was just a fun, energetic, loving leader who really got Citizens Climate Lobby moving. Well, the next year went back to Congress. That year we had 4 people. And after that, some things proceeded. What proceeded for me was this. Bill, who was leading the chapter at Salt Lake City, said, I'm going to run for Congress. I'm going to beat, well, I don't know if he felt he would beat, but I'm going to go as a single issue candidate, and I'm going to run against Senator Hatch. So I said, well, I'll share the leadership of the chapter with you, and you go off on your campaign, which he did. But that kind of pulled me into the leadership. And even though at first it was Bill and then Bill and I, but over the years, then we got a leadership team of 5 people on a steering committee. So we divided it up. So I got more involved with the activities of Citizen Climate Lobby. One of those is tabling. And I just love this picture. You see all the candy on the lower part that the little kid got out of there. So we went to various events and tabled and talked to people. But still each year we'd go back to Washington, D.C. And what we learned is that having young people with us really made a difference. And one of the highlights for me was going with young people to Washington, D.C. It was kind of win-win. For them, it was a real learning experience. For me, it was just so fun to have their energy and to see how effective they were. And I could tell you many stories that demonstrate how effective young people were in lobbying for climate change. I want to tell you just one story, which is one of my favorite stories. We had tried to meet with Senator Mike Lee face to face right from the beginning. And from then until even today, we've never had a scheduled meeting with him face to face. But Senator Lee had something called Yellow Jello with the Senator on a Wednesday afternoon. He invites anybody who's in Washington, D.C. to come have a little bit of Jello and talk with him. So I and the 3 students who you see here decided, well, hey, we'll stay another day. That we lobbied on Tuesday, this on Wednesday. Let's go see if we can actually meet with Senator Lee with his invitation to have Jello with the senator. So it happened to be that time there was a large group of people, and they brought in people in groups. So they brought us in this group of 4. And I had one student to my right, and I had 2 students to my left. And if you can picture, Senator Lee was in front of us. So Senator Lee looked to the student on my right. He said, "What brings you to Washington, D.C.?" He said, "Oh, I'm so concerned about climate change. I really think we need carbon fee and dividend. We need a policy to deal something with it." Then he looked right past me and looked to the next student and said, "What brings you to Washington, D.C.?" He said, "I am really concerned about climate change. I don't know about my future. I don't know if I want to have kids because of climate change." Well, by then, I guess he'd heard enough about climate change because he didn't ask the 4th student. But the fact that he passed me up and just listened to the students indicated to me that he was willing to listen to them, but not to me. And again, I could tell you many other stories with that. So how did we fund all these students going to Washington, D.C.? We would give them $500 or $600 to help them. And we needed to raise some money. In this picture, I have a picture of Jerry Elias. And the piano is a pianist who he knows. And Jerry came to me, or came to us and said, "Hey, I think we can have a fundraiser where I'll play some music. I've got a beautiful pianist to accompany me. And I can get the Libby Gardner Hall at University of Utah. But the only time I can get it is the night before Thanksgiving." Well, I thought in my mind, oh my gosh, no, we're not going to get anybody the night before Thanksgiving. Well, it turned out we had over 75 people. We raised some thousands of dollars, and it was a very important source of funds for our students. A couple of years later, Jerry said, I'm an author. So Jerry was the assistant concertmaster of the Utah Symphony. He since is retired. And in his retirement, he began writing books. And one of his books was called Devil's Trill. And they were all mysteries. And he said, "I'd like to tell a little bit about my book, Devil's Trill, and I'll play some of the music of Devil's Trill, which I think would be interesting for people." So we threw on another fundraiser. We had kind of like dinner that time. Again, we had probably 60 or 70 people and earned quite a few $1,000s. Then 2 years after that, Ian Wade came to me. Now, Ian Wade held a lot of kind of positions in the past. He was a leader in International Outward Bound, but one thing that he did remarkably was this: he participated in the 1990 International Peace Climb. What happened at this time was, this is part of the Cold War, and somebody came up with the idea, if we can have 6 climbers from the United States, 6 climbers from the Soviet Union, and 6 climbers from China work together to climb Mount Everest, this can be a story that the rest of the world can learn from. So Ian, this is Ian right here. This is a poster that was actually kind of a conglomerate. It was put together. These are all the people at the time. So there's Ian as a young man with Mount Everest in the background. Well, those 18 people, including Ian, climbed Mount Everest in 3 months. They had no Sherpas. They did all their own carrying stuff, and they were successful. So Ian said, I think maybe if I share my story about climbing Mount Everest at the Peace Climb, it might be interesting. So we, here we go again. Maybe I need to go out and go back in. It's not advancing. Oh, here we go. I just hit. Okay. So we got a venue over the Tracy Aviary. We had standing room only, over 100 people, raised, again, quite a few $1,000s. And this was a really important fundraiser to support our students. Another activity in Citizens Climate Lobby was quite important is writing. Now on the left here is Citizen Climate Lobby member Bob Spicer. Bob was a retired BYU professor, and now he's not a member of the LDS Church, but he was recruited to BYU because of his math abilities and math specialty. And he was down at BYU. He liked to come up to the Salt Lake Roasting Company when he had things to write. So he'd get an espresso, sit down and write. And so he had this kind of affinity for the Salt Lake Roasting Company. So he said, Dave, let's start meeting at the Salt Lake Roasting Company. We'll invite anybody who wants to come, and we'll start talking about things that we can write for the newspaper, letters to the editor, op-eds and stuff. So people will come for their ideas and we'll hash them out. Well, for 3 or 4 years, we did that, and we really had a lot of publications. In fact, at one point, somebody from the Sierra Club approached me and said, we wonder if we could sit down and talk to you a little bit. We'd like to understand how you get so many things, how your organization gets so many things published. But this was one of many that I had published, and this is actually about Catherine Hayhoe, who I'm going to talk about in a minute. But it was Science, Christianity Can Agree on Climate Change. And since this picture is there, I probably ought to say it. I didn't put the picture in there, but you might remember that Governor Scott in Florida kind of banned the use of the word climate change. And so in this thing says, we're changing the name of the state bird to the dodo. Another thing that we did is reach out to Republicans. And the way this came about was this. On the left is Ray Ward. Ray Ward is a Republican Utah State Senator. And he came and, not senator, he was a representative. He came and visited our chapter and said, I really like what you're doing in Citizens Climate Lobby, but I think you're spending a lot of time preaching to the choir. You need to reach out to Republicans, and I'd recommend that you get a table at the Republican convention. In fact, I'll even provide some funds to get a table. So on the right is Howard Bartlett, who for a number of years was organizing our tabling. And as you can see, we had a kind of a conservative message there: grow American jobs, American innovation, the US economy, while addressing climate change. So we had many, many wonderful conversations with people who at the Republican State Convention, and eventually did multiple conventions, state conventions and local conventions too. And that was a really important thing, reaching out to Republicans who in general were much more reluctant to embrace climate change as an issue. I'd like to mention a fellow that has had quite an influence, and this is Nick Huey. Nick gave a presentation down at Utah Valley. He's a BYU student, and he gave a presentation at Utah Valley University that I happened to attend. And I met him afterwards, and we talked, he and others talked about Citizens Climate Lobby. He kind of became interested. And so he became a member of Citizens Climate Lobby. His background is interesting because when he was in high school in the Midwest, he became concerned about climate change, and he thought, I really ought to choose a job and a profession where I can really have influence. And so he decided to go into marketing. So he was a marketing student, and he came up with a few novel ideas. I wanted to show you a couple of them that were really fun. One of the ideas was this: BYU is blue, University of Utah is red. And he thought, if I can have a message of BYU and University of Utah coming together in purple, that can be a symbol for the blue Democrats and the red Republicans in Congress. So he came up with the idea of getting purple flashlights and going up at halftime at the football game. And this is a U. It's taken from a kind of an angle so you can't see it. But here's the U from here's some of the people up above with the purple flashlights in the distance in that light. That's the stadium. So this was seen from the stadium. The following year they did that. We did that at BYU. So we had the purple Y, and this actually some of it got broadcast on television and so forth. But anyway, it did raise a lot of discussion. Another project that Nick came up with was to have a snowman protest. And so a number of people from Citizens Climate Lobby and others
You don't mind me having that on, do you?
supported him with going to the Capitol, making snowmen with the message, hey, our lives are at risk. If global warming continues, we won't be around. And this picture actually was taken from one of the newscasts. It had a lot of publicity, and anyway, it's an important way of raising awareness of the issue. One of the reasons that we were able to have so many excellent people really involved with Citizen Climate Lobby were through these two people, Beth Allen and Craig Bluen, husband and wife. To the left is their son Nate, and they were our welcoming committee. And you can just probably imagine just from looking at them that they're very welcoming, they're very sociable, just wonderful people. And they would reach out to people who expressed interest and really helped our group grow. Unfortunately, Craig was hit by a 16-year-old distracted driver and was killed instantly. And but I just want to tell you a brief story about Beth and his son Nate. So this driver, this young man, could have gone to jail for manslaughter, but they went to the judge and said, hey, I think putting him in jail is not going to serve him or anybody. We would like him to have a service that he can use this horrible experience to build from. So the judge actually agreed to that and committed him to giving talks throughout. This was out in Delta where they were, but throughout the county, throughout the area on distracted driving. Incidentally, Nate, who's on the left, subsequently ran for the Utah State Senate, and he is the youngest Utah State Senator in the Senate. One of the most rewarding things that I did, though, was get involved with hikes with John Curtis. In 2018, John Curtis invited anybody in his district, he was a congressman at that time, to hike Timpanogos with him, because he was thinking, how can I bring in my love of the outdoors and love of hiking with, connected with my constituents? So he invited everybody. Well, this is John Curtis, and to his left is his wife, Sue. And here are the four of us from Citizens Climate Lobby who hiked with him. So from the rest of the district, there were only three other people from the district. So we had about 10 hours of time to talk with Congressman Curtis. And it was really a wonderful opportunity to talk in ways that we couldn't talk before. In a subsequent hike, somebody said, Congressman Curtis, how should we address you on these hikes? And he said, well, if we're above 6,000 feet, just call me John. And you could imagine kind of the difference in being able to talk to him as John for hours. Not everybody talked for hours at a time, but we with him for hours. So anyway, most of us made the summit. The next year, he decided to have a kind of a demonstration of the value of public transportation. So he did a journey from the Capitol where he took a bus, then he took the tracks, then he took the bus again in Provo, and eventually then got on his bike with with anybody who would ride with him, and they rode down to Moab, we didn't ride to Moab, but anyway, this was another time for anybody who wanted to join. Well, after those first two hikes, we had developed a relationship with Congressman Curtis such that he was willing to have a hike with members of Citizens Climate Lobby. And we didn't make it exclusively. They had to be members of Climate Lobby, but we organized this. To the right is Keith English, who was the liaison to Congressman Curtis, who really just was great in organizing these hikes. And then you recognize our friend Doug Evans to the right. And on this particular hike, this is a trail that Doug was instrumental in having built, and Doug had suggested it. We called this our 3 seasons hike because we started out in the sun, but then I want to show you what happened after that. We started in the sun, oops, and then it started to snow.
Good.
Just a second,
This
listen.
is the John Curtis hike / lobby meeting. And we're up in the Uintas enjoying the snow. Yeah.
So anyway, you get the idea. But before the day was out, the morning was out, the snow had stopped, the sun had come out, and we sat down with Congressman Curtis and had a real lovely conversation with him. So now it's yearly that we have, the Citizens Climate Lobby has a yearly hike with John Curtis. Most recently, we hiked to Rock Canyon now that he's senator. I want to just mention one other person who was very influential here in Utah, and that's Catherine Hayhoe. So to my left is Catherine, and to her left is Susan Soleil. Susan was the director of Interfaith Power and Light, which is a faith-based climate organization that works with congregations to have them involved dealing with climate change. Catherine is a very well-respected scientist. She's a professor at Texas Tech University right now. She's the chief scientist of the Nature Conservancy, but she's also an evangelical Christian. And she is able to talk from the aspect of faith. And she was willing to come to Utah for a week. And Susan really organized this, and we worked with her. But in 1 week, she had 27 engagements. And that was with one afternoon off. 6 of those were to groups related to the LDS Church. So we went to KSL Radio and KSL TV, happened to have a joint board meeting that she went to. She spoke on Doug Wright's show. Doug liked her so much, he asked her to speak on the morning show. And then she went down to BYU and spoke on radio. And also there was a forum that she spoke at. And I was so impressed with Susan, with Catherine, because, well, in so many ways, but she had a core message that she had, but she would change her message depending on the audience. So when she went down to BYU, she quoted from the Doctrine and Covenants in her talk about climate change. And she's the first person that I've known has done that. Subsequently, she was invited back. She spoke at the BYU Forum, and she has had positive influence. Oh, the other one we met was Richard Hinckley, who was in Area 70. I think at that time, though, he was, or it might have been a General 70. He was with the public relations for the church. I'm going to maybe go a little faster. I don't want to go speak too fast, but something CCL was really involved with was a resolution for the state. And on the left is Piper Christian. So Piper was a student in Logan High School, and she was in the environmental club. And in their club, they were learning about climate change, that the climate was changing, humans were having an influence in causing it. But they learned that the Utah State in 2010 had passed a resolution saying the evidence that carbon dioxide is a pollutant causing climate change is just not settled. And there should be no policy at the state level or the federal level because of that. Well, the students wrote their own resolution, and this was a resolution. In 2017, they went up to the Capitol. Senator DeBacchus said, I'll take that up for you. Well, they needed to get a hearing at a Senate committee. The head of the committee said, I will not hear a resolution on climate change. So it went nowhere. So Senator Baca said, well, look, let's have our own hearing. And so they had a hearing in the Capitol, and they invited the senators and representatives, and a few people came. Well, fortunately, a wonderful representative, Becky Edwards, who was here in the kind of checked outfit, said, hey, I'll take that on. She was so impressed with the students. So she spent the summer between 2017, the summer 2017, going to other people and talking with them. And she would seek out people who she thought would be against it. One of the first persons she said, she said, hey, I'd like you to read this resolution over and tell me what you think. He said, I can't support it. She said, why is that? He says, because it has the words climate change. So she said, what if we just said changing of the climate? He said, okay, I can accept that. Climate change had become so political. So anyway, here's her and then one of the students who were testifying. Well, the outcome of what the students did was absolutely remarkable. So the next year, with Becky leading the bill and the students talking with their legislators, this is what happened. The students initiate, Representative Becky Edwards sponsors, and the Governor Herbert signs concurrent resolution on environmental and economic stewardship. And here are a number of the key students with Becky Edwards in the background. But just to give you an idea of the contrast between this and the 2010 resolution, recognizes the impact of climate change, supports solutions, encourage the use of sound science, reduction of emissions. But look at the vote. The House vote was 51-21, the Senate vote 23-3, and among Republicans, it was 57-21. So this was a remarkable achievement by the students, and it really changed quite a bit the tone of discussion around climate change at the state level. I'd like to just take a few minutes now to talk about the development of the LDS Action Team that we're a part of today. I mentioned my conversation with J.J. Edwards at that first time they went back to Congress. And I came back thinking, wow, the Catholic Pope has really made a statement about climate change. If our president or the church would have a statement similar to that, it would have such an influence. And in the state, and all of our members of Congress are members of the LDS faith. So I brought a group of friends together. At that time, we didn't have action teams. These are just friends who I thought might be interested. And one of those was Lincoln Davies. Lincoln was a environmental professor up at the University of Utah. Well, up at the University of Utah, each year they had an environmental related symposium called the Wallace Stegner Symposium. And he decided to have the symposium on religion, faith, and the environment. And in this, he invited leaders from various faiths, including from the LDS Church. And Marcus Nass, who was a 70, represented the LDS Church and gave a wonderful talk about LDS faith and why our faith really should include caring for the environment. Well, that group at that time felt that talk was so important that we ought to see how things kind of play out. So the group kind of disbanded. So over the next couple of years, not too much happened, but around 2017, myself, Dave Reiser, and Jim Whiteman got together and said, hey, let's see if we could kind of activate an LDS Action Team, because what had happened in the meantime is Citizens Climate Lobby had developed a number of action teams around various topics. And there was a number of faith-based action teams. So there's a Catholic action team and Presbyterian action team and Unitarian action team. So we were able to bring some students together, and we had a group of about 5 or 6 students who were quite enthusiastic. One of the students made this kind of logo, the LDS Action Team. Those are 4 trees together. And anyway, they were very enthusiastic. They wanted to get 100 letters in 100 days to send to leaders of the church. Well, that didn't quite happen, and the students who were leaders graduated, so that effort kind of petered out. But because we had an action team, Dave and I, when we went to the conference in Washington, D.C., we went to a setting where they invited people with action teams to come and have a table to introduce our action team to other people. So Dave and I manned the action team. We didn't have too many people come, but somebody left his card there when we were in the meeting. I picked up that card, and about 2 months later, I thought, well, gee, I ought to just contact this person and see. Well, that person is Tom Kane, who has led this evening, who has been a leader and co-leader of the action team ever since then, and has really brought us to where we are today with the action team. There's the other peoples. Craig Smith was there, and we have for this picture too. We have Dave, Tom's brother Dave, who's on the call with us. One of the brilliant things I think that Tom came up with, and was, let's bring the LDS groups together who are concerned about environment. So there's an environmental arm of Mormon Women for Ethical Government. There's LDS Earth Stewardship. And there used to be another one which is not there now. But anyway, brought together as in a Creation Care Coalition. And
What?
let's have a meeting all together, which we did. And we were fortunate to be able to have Catherine Hayhoe back. And she spoke to a meeting here in Salt Lake where we had almost 100 people. And that has continued to have that with the coalition. Well, I want to wrap up. Oh, yeah. One other thing I want to say, I've seen tremendous change with the church. Now, for reasons I understand, our leaders haven't come out with a Laudato Si or a fate of mountain glaciers or anything like that. It's just, it's so controversial in politics. But this is the areas of focus that's on their current website. And look at this. The first one is renewable energy adoption. The second, energy efficiency. The fifth one is reducing transportation emissions, in addition to other important ones of conservation and so forth. So even though they're not from the pulpit saying we need to deal with climate change, they through the actions are addressing our rising emissions and climate change. And that's been really rewarding to see that happening through the work and effort of many, many people who've been involved. I want to just finish up, since I told you in the beginning, I wrote this for my grandchildren. And this is my granddaughter 7 years ago. She was 10 at the time. This is my oldest granddaughter, Ashton. And we were going up to Redview Garden, driving in the car. And all of a sudden, she spontaneously started talking as if she'd gone to Congress and was talking. And so when we got up to Redview Garden, I said, could you do that again? I just wanted to take a video of you while you're talking to Congress. So she did. So this wasn't the spontaneous one in the car, but this still was pretty spontaneous. It's a little hard to understand her in the beginning. So I want to tell you what she says right in the beginning. She said, so all you people in Congress, this is what global warming is. And if you don't get it, you should probably listen up here. So that's how she starts off.
To all you people in Congress, this is what global warming is. If you don't get it, then you probably should listen up here. So, global warming is when CO2, carbon dioxide, goes into the atmosphere. Some of it goes out of space, but some of it stays down in Earth, and it blocks any warm stuff from going out. So it makes the whole entire planet super steaming hot. Good morning. This is Good Night News.
So that's what inspires me. And here on the right, to Betsy's left, is Ashton at age 17, and my other grandchildren, 4 granddaughters who keep me motivated. And I also want to give a shout out to Betsy, who supported all the work and time that I did during this time. So that's the end of my presentation, and we got a little time for discussion, hopefully enough.
I'm really glad you shared that with us. That there's a lot of things there I didn't know about, and it really gives me perspective where you're coming from and what you've done. It's excellent.
Thank you. And I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but I realized that I could do another presentation talking about other people who did really remarkable things during this time. I selected out some that were particularly memorable to me, but I just think of so many other people who've been leaders and done important things during the time that I've been involved. Just didn't have time to talk about everybody.
David, I love seeing your granddaughter. That
Thank
was
you.
great.
Thank you.
Talk
Thank
about
you.
enthusiasm.
Yeah.
You need to bottle that.
Yeah, bottle it and take it. I appreciate many friends who have joined here too today. And Julie's among those. Thanks, Julie.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
I was talking with Ian, who's on this call, not too long ago, and he reminded me that you had been instrumental in spending some time talking with him to bring him on board to CCL.
Oh my gosh.
And you seem to have a knack for that. And many action teams have somebody that's their role, is to spend the time to bring people aboard and so forth. We can't take an hour or two like the time you spent with Ian, but how do you model that? I know it's not a method or a process, it's just getting to know somebody, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it's not something I guess I trained for. I was a pediatrician. As a pediatrician, I spent my career talking to people, trying to understand what they're coming from, where their concerns are, and so forth. So I think it's really natural to reach out to people and ask things like, how'd you get interested in this? What are your biggest concerns, and so forth. So I think just kind of getting to know people on a personal basis. And thanks for that, Ian. I totally forgotten that. That really boost my boost my enthusiasm for this. And Tom's asked me to be doing this to folks who are be interested in the LDS Action Team, because I've stepped down from leadership from that also. But now he's pulling me back in a little bit. I'm happy to be there in that way.
I can second that. Dave talked to me for about an hour, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him as well. And I don't know exactly the secret, but when he talks to you as an equal and as a friend, and you feel his spirit and ambition and excitement, and you just want to be part of it. And that's probably how we have to talk to everybody. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Doug. And I suspect maybe that's part of what appeals to me with Citizens Climate Lobby, because we say, yeah, we'll talk to everybody, no matter what their political views are or where they're coming from. We'll accept them as people. And I think now that message is more important, has been emphasized. It's more important than ever.
Dave, do you get a lot of questions about the science? Is that something that comes up?
Oh,
I mean, from time to
I've
time.
got friends on the call, but most of the people that I know, I've talked with them about citizen climate, about the science. I think that's that. And then the people who've expressed interest, I think they probably don't look to me as a expert on the science. So probably not a whole lot, but it's more concerns. What are your concerns? We all have concerns, whether it's about our grandchildren or just about our love of the environment, or care for God's creation. And we can connect on those areas we have in common.
Thank you. Well, I'm running all my questions now because I've got another Zoom in 5 minutes. Dave, you referred to it very tactfully as, something about the president or the White House. That was it. But in a polarized thing, in a polarized time like this, how do you maintain that nonpartisan tone when people are very reactive? Is that something just through your profession or your personality? How is that a problem for you? It's a problem for me. I'm a lawyer and we like to argue, and that's not a great background for this. But how does that look to you?
I must say, I still preach to the choir a lot. Most of the people I talk to have similar views in a lot of ways. However, I do have a fellow I got to know at the sports center where I work out. He emigrated from Ukraine about 25 years ago. His wife is Jewish, and they felt she would not have the opportunities that she needed, so they came to the United States, start a new life. He's a professor of physics, and he is extremely right-wing, extremely supporting Trump. He does not believe humans are causing climate change, and he tells me all the physics reasons not. So I've heard his point of view. He's heard my point of view, and neither of us. There doesn't seem around climate. There doesn't seem to be any common ground. But we both grow peaches or apricots. We started talking about apricots together, and he said, "Well, come over to my house. Let me just show you what I do with apricots." And I said, "Well, come over to my house. Let me just show you my tree and stuff." So we don't really talk very much about climate anymore, but we still, just talk about health and fitness and apricots and things that we have in common. So there are people that we're just not going to come eye to eye with around this issue.
Gotcha.
But if we
Dave,
connect on a
I would-
personal level,
I
and this
would-
is what Catherine Hayhoe says so much, if we can connect on a personal level, then we have at least an opportunity of moving forward.
Dave, this is
Fred?
Fred Rollins. Longtime friend. I love you dearly. As a person, you're amazing. You have a gift. You have a lot of gifts, family and many other areas. But this area of bringing people together is a gift. And you have mastered it. And you found ways to get people together, like the apricots or whatever, climbing up to the top of a mountain. And if we could only learn from the Dave Follands of how to do this, our whole world would be a better place. Because if you just go to that label of, like you said earlier, climate change, it didn't work. But changing the climate did work. So you find a way to get to the heart of it without just in your face type of thing. And that is such a gift. And I admire you for it.
Thanks so much, Fred. And that love and respect is mutual. You've been just such a great friend. I think all of you, just a sec, let me just grab something here. I don't have a book about it, but Catherine Hayhoe does. Her book Saving Us, The Climate Scientist's Case for Hope in Healing a Divided World. And that's where Catherine Hayhoe comes from. And there's, her book talks in quite a bit of detail. In fact, she even brings up Utah, her visit here and stuff, of connecting around those things you can connect with, and then explore areas that are maybe a little more contentious.
Dave, I think Fred said it best. I think your commitment and your genuineness are what really form those relationships and retain the relationships and gather us together. And you've been a tremendous influence for good in my life, as well as in this chapter and cause. Thank you. Thanks
so much. But I've got to reflect back to Tom, because as far as bringing people together, he was the one, he after church, he would go across the street and play his guitar and sing his music and songs that he had written about climate change. And he's the one for sure who has, I think been the lifeblood and brought us together with Citizens Climate Lobby Action Team, LDS Action Team. So Tom, thank you so much.